"Oh, no," said Dolly. "At first things were rather uncomfortable, but now we've settled everything wonderfully, thanks to my old nurse," she said, indicating Matryona Filimonovna, who, seeing that they were speaking of her, smiled brightly and cordially to Levin. She knew him, and knew that he would be a good match for the young lady, and was very keen to see the matter settled. "Won't you get in, sir? We'll make room this side," she said to him. "No, I'll walk. Children, who'd like to race the horses with me?" The children knew Levin very little, and couldn't remember when they had seen him, but they experienced none of that strange feeling of shyness and hostility toward him which children so often experience towards hypocritical grown-up people, and for which they are so often and miserably punished. Hypocrisy in anything whatever may deceive the cleverest and most penetrating man, but the least wide-awake of children recognizes it and is revolted by it, however ingeniously it may be disguised. Whatever faults Levin had, there was not a trace of hypocrisy in him, and so the children showed him the same friendliness that they saw in their mother's face. On his invitation, the two elder ones at once jumped out to him and ran with him as simply as they would have done with their nurse or Miss Hull or their mother. Lily, too, began begging to go to him, and her mother handed her to him. He sat her on his shoulder and ran along with her. Don't be afraid, Darya Alexandrovna," he said, smiling brightly to the mother. "There's no chance of my hurting or dropping her." And looking at his strong, agile, very careful and needlessly wary movements, the mother felt her mind at rest and smiled gaily and approvingly as she watched him. Here, in the country, with children, and with Darya Alexandrovna, with whom he was in sympathy, Levin was in a mood not infrequent with him of childlike light-heartedness, which she particularly liked in him. As he ran with the children, he taught them gymnastic feats, started Miss Hull laughing with his peculiar English accent, and talked to Darya Alexandrovna of his pursuits in the country. After dinner, Darya Alexandrovna, sitting alone with him on the balcony, began to speak of Kitty. "You know, Kitty's coming here, and is going to spend the summer with me." "Really?" he said, flushing, and at once, to change the conversation, he said, "Then shall I send you 2 cows? If you insist on a bill, you shall pay me 5 roubles a month. But it's not nice of you." "No, thank you. We can manage very well now." "Oh, well then, I'll have a look at your cows, and if you'll allow me, I'll give directions about their food. Everything depends on their food." And Levin, to keep the conversation here, explained to Darya Alexandrovna the theory of dairy farming based on the principle that the cow is simply a machine for the transformation of food into milk, and so on. He talked of this, and passionately longed to hear more of Kitty, and at the same time was afraid of hearing it. He dreaded the breaking up of the inward peace he had gained with such effort. "Yes, but still all this has to be looked after, and who is there to look after it?" Darya Alexandrovna responded without interest. She had by now got her household matters so satisfactorily arranged, thanks to Matryona Filimonovna, that she was disinclined to make any change in them. Besides, she had no faith in Levin's knowledge of farming. General principles, as to the cow being a machine for the production of milk, she looked on with suspicion. It seemed to her that such principles could be only a hindrance in farm management. It all seemed to her a far simpler matter. All that was needed, as Matryona Filimonovna had explained, was to give Brindle and Whitebelly more food and drink, and not to let the cook carry all the kitchen slops to the laundress's cow. That was clear. But general propositions as to feeding on meal and on grass were doubtful and obscure. And, what was most important, she wanted to talk about Kitty. Chapter 10. "Kitty writes to me that there's nothing she longs for so much as peace and solitude," Dolly said after the silence that had followed. "And how is she? Better?" Levin asked in agitation. "Thank God, she's quite well again. I never believed her lungs were affected." "Oh, I'm very glad," said Levin, and Dolly thought she saw something touching, helpless in his face as he said this, and looked silently into her face. "Let me ask you, Konstantin Dmitrievitch," said Darya Alexandrovna, smiling her kindly and rather mocking smile. "Why is it you're angry with Kitty?" "I? I'm not angry with her," said Levin. "Yes, you are angry. Why was it you didn't come to see us or them when you were in Moscow?" "Darya Alexandrovna," he said, blushing up to the roots of his hair, "I wonder really that with your kind heart you don't feel this. How is it you feel no pity for me, if nothing else, when you know—" "What do I know?" "You know I proposed, and I was refused," said Levin. And all the tenderness he had been feeling for Kitty a minute before was replaced by a feeling of anger for the slight he had suffered. "What makes you suppose I know?" "Because everybody knows it." "That's just where you're mistaken. I didn't know it, though I had guessed it was so." "Well, now you know it." "All I knew was that something had happened that made her dreadfully miserable, and that she begged me never to speak of it. And if she wouldn't tell me, she would certainly not speak of it to anyone else. But what did pass between you? Tell me." "I have told you." "When was it?" "When I was at their house the last time." "Do you know," said Darya Alexandrovna, "I'm awfully, awfully sorry for her. You suffer only from pride." "Perhaps so," said Levin, "but—" She interrupted him. "But she, poor girl, I'm awfully, awfully sorry for her. Now I see it all." "Well, Darya Alexandrovna, you must excuse me," he said, getting up. "Goodbye, Darya Alexandrovna, till we meet again." "No, wait a minute," she said, clutching him by the sleeve. "Wait a minute. Sit down." "Please, please, don't let us talk of this," he said, sitting down, and at the same time feeling rise up and stir within his heart a hope he had believed to be buried. "If I did not like you," she said, and tears came into her eyes, "if I didn't know you as I do know you—" The feeling that had seemed dead revived more and more, rose up and took possession of Levin's heart. "Yes, I understand it all now," said Darya Alexandrovna. "You can't understand it. For you men who are free and make your own choice, it's always clear whom you love. But a girl's in a position of suspense, with all a woman's or maiden's modesty. A girl who sees you men from afar, who takes everything on trust. A girl may have, and often has, such a feeling that she cannot tell what to say." "Yes, if the heart doesn't speak." "No, the heart does speak. But just consider, you men have views about a girl. You come to the house, you make friends, you criticize, you wait to see if you have found what you love, and then, when you are sure you love her, you propose." "Well, that's not quite it." "Anyway, you propose when your love is ripe, or when the balance has completely turned between the two you are choosing from. But a girl is not asked. She is expected to make her choice, and yet she cannot choose. She can only answer yes or no." "Yes, to choose between me and Vronsky," thought Levin, and the dead thing that had come to life within him died again, and only weighed on his heart and set it aching. "Darya Alexandrovna," he said, "that's how one chooses a new dress or some purchase or other, not love. The choice has been made, and so much the better. And there can be no repeating it." "Oh, pride, pride," said Darya Alexandrovna, as though despising him for the baseness of this feeling in comparison with that other feeling which only women know. "At the time when you made Kitty an offer, she was just in a position in which she couldn't answer. She was in doubt. Doubt between you and Vronsky. She was seeing him every day, and you she hadn't seen for a long while. Supposing she'd been older. I, for instance, in her place, could have felt no doubt. I always disliked him, and so it has turned out." Levin recalled Kitty's answer. She had said, "No, that cannot be." Daria Alexandrovna, he said dryly, I appreciate your confidence in me. I believe you're making a mistake. But whether I'm right or wrong, that pride you so despise makes any thought of Katerina Alexandrovna out of the question for me. You understand? Utterly out of the question. I will only say one thing more. You know that I am speaking of my sister, whom I love as I love my own children. I don't say she cared for you. All I meant to say is that her refusal at that moment proves nothing. I don't know, said Levin, jumping up. If you only knew how you are hurting me. It's just as if a child of yours were dead, and they were to say to you, he would have been like this and like that, and he might have lived, and how happy you would have been in him. But he's dead, dead, dead. How absurd you are, said Daria Alexandrovna, looking with mournful tenderness at Levin's excitement. Yes, I see it all more and more clearly, she went on musingly. So you won't come to see us then, when Kitty's here? No, I will not come. Of course, I won't avoid meeting Katerina Alexandrovna, but as far as I can, I will try to save her the annoyance of my presence. You are very, very absurd, repeated Daria Alexandrovna, looking with tenderness into his face. Very well. Then let it be as though we had not spoken of this. What have you come in for, Tanya? She said in French to the little girl who had come in. Where's my spade, Mamma? I speak French, and you must too. The little girl tried to say it in French, but couldn't remember the French for spade. The mother prompted her, and then told her in French where to look for the spade. And this made a disagreeable impression on Levin. Everything in Daria Alexandrovna's house and children struck him now as by no means so charming as a little while before. And why does she talk French with the children? He thought. How unnatural and false it is. And the children feel it so. Learning French and unlearning sincerity, he thought to himself, unaware that Daria Alexandrovna had thought all that over 20 times already, and yet, even at the cost of some loss of sincerity, believed it necessary to teach her children French in that way. But why are you going? Do stay a little. Levin stayed to tea, but his good humour had vanished, and he felt ill at ease. After tea he went out into the hall to order his horses to be harnessed. When he came back, he found Daria Alexandrovna greatly disturbed, with a troubled face and tears in her eyes. While Levin had been outside, an incident had occurred which had utterly shattered the happiness she had been feeling that day, and her pride in her children. Grisha and Tanya had been fighting over a ball. Daria Alexandrovna, hearing a scream in the nursery, ran in and saw a terrible sight. Tanya was pulling Grisha's hair, while he, with a face hideous with rage, was beating her with his fists wherever he could get at her. Something snapped in Daria Alexandrovna's heart when she saw this. It was as if darkness had swooped down upon her life. She felt that these children of hers, that she was so proud of, were not merely most ordinary, but positively bad, ill-bred children, with coarse, brutal propensities, wicked children. She couldn't talk or think of anything else, and she couldn't speak to Levin of her misery. Levin saw that she was unhappy and tried to comfort her, saying that it showed nothing bad, that all children fight. But even as he said it, he was thinking in his heart, no, I won't be artificial and talk French with my children. But my children won't be like that. All one has to do is not spoil children, not to distort their nature, and they'll be delightful. No, my children won't be like that. He said goodbye and drove away, and she didn't try to detain him. Chapter 11. In the middle of July, the elder of the village on Levin's sister's estate, about 15 miles from Pokorskoye, came to Levin to report on how things were going there and on the hay. The chief source of income on his sister's estate was from the riverside meadows. In former years, the hay had been bought by the peasants for 20 rubles for every 3 acres. When Levin took over the management of the estate, he thought, on examining the grasslands, that they were worth more, and he fixed the price at 25 rubles for every 3 acres. The peasants wouldn't give that price, and, as Levin suspected, discouraged other purchasers. Then Levin had driven over himself and arranged to have the grass cut, partly by hired labor, partly at a payment of a certain proportion of the crop. His own peasants put every hindrance they could in the way of this new arrangement, but it was carried out, and the first year the meadow